Okay. So I will go through some of the highlights of the Dispatch article. So the short of the story is that Dispatch published this bombshell article, debunking some of the claims of Mama Roach and some of the claims of the five girls. So, and they had receipts. So we're just gonna go through them, and then we're actually gonna pause. I know that a lot of us don't like her and we want her to be put in her place, but I also want to encourage everybody to be objective. Always remember that what may be moral may not necessarily be legal, and what may be legal will not necessarily be moral. And what we know is different from what we can prove in court. Okay, so before we get into that, let me just phrase it this way. I am not a fan of Dispatch. I do think that they impede in people's private lives too much. Um, but freedom of expression actually cuts both ways. This is something that I said in my Patreon. The it cuts both ways. So if you want to enjoy freedom of expression, do know that other people will also have to enjoy freedom of expression. And the thing is that we get to say the things that we want to say to people who don't want like us about the things that they don't want to hear, right? So you get to say the things you want to say to people who don't like you about the things they don't want to hear. But in the same breath, people who you don't like also get to say the things that you don't want to hear. And the only way we know freedom of expression is actually working is when both things are happening. So I know that a lot of people are sensitive about, oh, this is propaganda. They're brainwashing people. Always remember that what you feel to be right is what other deems to be very, very wrong. And you can look at it this way, like religion. You have a certain faith, and you're very, very sure that your faith is correct, but then other people have their own faith and they are sure that their faith is also correct. So that's just, so it doesn't mean that I like Dispatch all of a sudden because of what they did. I think that many of the things that they do is unethical. But again, something that is unethical doesn't necessarily mean it is legal. Remember that they were the ones who published the story about Suga. They were the ones who first published it and they kept on it. And they were one of the people who took a picture of him when he reported to the police station for questioning. So I still don't like them. I don't think I ever will. But I don't like them in the same way I don't like many other media companies and many other media journalists. So whatever it is that they are doing, everything is protected by the law. So always remember this phrase, dura lex sed lex. So for all the journalists out there, this is something that we have been taught in journalism school. The law may be harsh. I'm sorry, it's wrong spelling. The law may be harsh, but that is the law. Another phrase that you should always remember is expresso unius est exclusio alterus, and that means the expression of one thing is the exclusion of another. So in the law, if you include something, then everything else is excluded. In the same breath, if you exclude something, everything else is included. What is not prohibited is allowed. Whatever Dispatch is doing, it is allowed no matter how despicable it may be. All right. Now, on to the article that they published. I will just go through some of the highlights. Okay. This part that they published are taken from Mama Roach's Telegram. So she did learn her lesson and stopped using Kakao messages, and she shifted to Telegram, thinking that it is encrypted. So she's probably thinking, oh, this shit is encrypted. It's not going to get leaked. Somehow, Dispatch found a way to his Telegram. So these are some of the messages that they got. So this is the original message. Okay, this is the original message. And this part is the translated one. So, working hard while enduring disgust, it feels like I'm doing something good for someone else. It's a waste to feed those reckless kids. And she was referring to New Jeans. This statement, this is our lift from the article of Dispatch. Excuse me. This statement offers a glimpse into Mama Roach duality. It offers that she fundamentally does not respect the artist because of the way that she is addressing the artist. According to Mama Roach, New Jeans are simply reckless kids, and her role is to endure the disgust. Okay. Um, According to the Dispatch article, whenever Min Hee-jin or Mama Roach faces an unfavorable situation, she often claims she has no recollection of it. So remember when her Kakao Talk messages were leaked, she would often say, "Oh, I don't really remember the context of that. How can I remember text messages from 3 years ago, blah, blah, blah." However, remember that Mama Roach, actually called New Jeans dog fat. She called them dog and fat kids. And apparently, that message wasn't from 3 years ago. It was just from 3 months prior. So it was leaked May. It was leaked April. Sorry. It was leaked April. The Kakao Talk message was leaked April. And that message was taken January of the same year. So it's impossible, almost impossible that she would not remember with that amount of time. Okay. Another thing that they disclosed is that they actually obtained messages sent by Mama Roach to the family of New Jeans members, so to the parents and family members. And she was asking if the YouTube live broadcast of the five girls was supposed to happen at 7 o'clock on that day. So it isn't true that no one knew about it. She actually knew, and she was asking the parents if it was supposed to happen at 7 o'clock. Another thing that they disclosed is a picture of Hanny meeting Mama Roach just before the National Assembly. So they people are calling Henny liar because she claimed that she decided on her own, and then apparently she met with Mama Roach before the National Assembly. This picture is of her on her way of Mama Roach on her way to meet the chairman of Davao Link. It is a company. It's a company. And it was supposed to be the company that was going to invest in her. Okay. And she was according to Dispatch, uh they saw a three-way meeting. This one, Dispatch captured a three-way meeting between Mama Roach, the chairman of Davao Link, and Uncle B. Uncle B is the uncle of one of the New Jeans member. Okay, so Uncle B or Mr. B, that's the uncle of one of the New Jeans member. Apparently, Uncle B is the one who bridged Mama Roach with the chairman of Davao Link. And she is asking Davao Link to invest in her. She also, in the article of Dispatch, she actually asked the chairman if she can bring the five girls with her. And at that time, she was still the board of director, a member of the board of director. Sorry, a member of the board of ADOR. So that would be breach because she's not supposed to do that. Now, Chairman A, the chairman of Davao Link, appointed two people as board of director, as a director in Davao Link, and these two people are close associates of Mama Roach. However, if you would remember, it was leaked that Mama Roach was looking for an outside investor. And she immediately released a statement denying that she was talking to any investor. Okay. So what happened was that the the board of directors meeting didn't take place because suddenly Mama Roach denied any association with them. So Chairman A eventually fired the two board of directors that were close associates of Mama Roach. um, Now, another shocking thing that they disclosed is this part. This is a Telegram message, remember? And she said, "This is Mama Roach talking. I was shamelessly flirting with blank." So, blank is supposed to be a senior director in HYBE. Okay, so she was telling somebody that she was shamelessly flirting with one of the senior directors of HYBE. And she said, I sat close and told them to come closer because I couldn't hear them. So it was like she was teasing the guy, like, come closer, come closer. I don't know how to flirt. Damn it. Okay. I feel like, and then she said, I feel like if we sleep together, if they have sex, they'd completely fall for me. That's what she said. So she in her mind, she's irresistible. And I admire her confidence. I really admire her confidence. Imagine saying that all you need to do is sleep with me and you will fall in love with me. Are you that confident? I am not that confident. So when I read it, I was like, girl, more power to you. Okay. Um, it's not, and then she said, it's not that I want to seduce them with my body. Oh my God. Okay, supermodel. But if sleeping together makes things easier, then I might consider it. So I'm like, okay, so the assumption is that they would want to sleep with you, right? That's confidence, man. You go. That was my initial reaction. Honestly, when I first read this, I'm like, dude, the confidence. Slow clap. Okay. So now there are questions as to how dispatch actually managed to get a hold of these messages, because this is Telegram, so this is encrypted. That is why a lot of people actually like communicating and using Telegram, because it's encrypted, and when it is encrypted, it means nobody else can read it except the person, the people that are communicating in the platform. So it means that whoever leaked this would either be her or the person she was talking with, right? If this is one on one. If this is a group chat, then it could be one of the people that were in the group chat. That is the beauty of Telegram. It's encrypted. Okay. So the question is, a lot of people are asking, then who sent dispatch all of these messages? And there were some talks that it's actually one of the parents of New Jeans. And they are thinking that it is the parent, one of the parents of Herin. Herin. Now, there are also speculations that Uncle B, the person who bridged Mama Roach with the chairman of Davao Link, is actually the uncle of Herin. All right. So these are just speculations. I don't know where they're getting this. I'm just communicating this with you because I am so entertained. I want you to be entertained with me. Okay. Now, so we don't know who actually is the one who is the source of all of these messages and all of this leaked information. Now, this is just my take. If it is true that Uncle B, the person who linked Mama Roach with the chairman of Davao Link, is the uncle of Herin, I wouldn't be surprised if it is also the parents or one of the parents of Herin who eventually leak these messages. That they will be the one, that parent will be the one to blow the whistle. In other words, because that means that they have some background in corporate business, in corporate culture, and they kind of know that whatever is happening right now shouldn't be happening in this, because they're in that world. So I'm not surprised. Okay. Now, the question is, someone is asking a question here. So did Mama Roach manage to have sex with the director of HYBE? No. So the director, so Meep is actually saying it's not Herin, it's Hyein. Yein, not Herin. Okay. Yein's uncle. Okay. According to me. So, did she manage to have sex with the director of HYBE? No. So the director of HYBE managed to say no. So I guess all the confidence didn't work. Damn it. Okay. All right. So the question is, are this acceptable in court as evidence? Right. So all of this expose, all of this this screen caps of Telegram messages, are this acceptable in court? So, number one, it depends on how it was obtained. So, one thing that we do need to understand is before the court to actually accept something as an evidence, it has to be legally obtained. That has to have been obtained legally. The question is, how did they obtain this screen caps and messages and documents? Now, in South Korea, if two people are talking, for as long as one of the people who are talking, or a group of people who are talking, as long as one of those actually consented to releasing the conversation, that's legal. So if the person who leaked all of these Telegram messages is actually one of the people that is in this conversation, then that would be a legal evidence that may be used in court. But the other question is relevant to what? Like acceptable to what? Like what is the case? If you're showing me Telegram messages and we're hearing a criminal case, someone killed somebody, did the Telegram messages reveal who the killer is or who the murderer is? Excuse me. So that's the first question. Like, if relevant to what? What is the case that is being heard? Being photographed, the other thing, we do need to remember that material evidence is different from circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is just by accident. It's just circumstantial, just happened. It could have just happened. There, you will not be able to prove a direct link. So being photographed with Davao Link officials aren't conclusive. So, for example, I saw J Hope. I took a photo with J Hope. It doesn't mean J Hope knows me, right? I could show that picture to the world and say, hey, I'm friends with J Hope. Nope. You just took a picture. That's what it is. It doesn't mean that you are friends with J Hope. So the same thing happens here. She could be taking pictures with the Davao Link officials and meeting with them. It doesn't mean that they're meeting about investments or that they're actually meeting, that they know each other that intimately at all. Okay, so for them to actually establish a link that she was actually talking with Davao Link, HYBE, ADOR, or Dispatch should have something more concrete and something more direct that will prove beyond reasonable doubt that she was actually looking and talking with Davao Link to get investments while she was still with ADOR. Okay, now for Hani meeting with her before Hani actually made an appearance in the Korean National Assembly. So what? They met. So people are saying, or in the article of Dispatch, they're saying that this yellow envelope is the invitation from the National Assembly. How did they know? It could have been any other paper, right? To us, we could say, come on, it's so obvious. To us, it's obvious, but to the court, they don't work with the obvious. They work with material evidence. So unless there is actually some proof that that is the invitation from the National Assembly, then we don't have a case. The other thing is, even if it was the National Assembly invitation, so it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't mean that it was actually Mama Roach who convinced Henny to appear in the National Assembly. They just met. It doesn't mean anything yet. Okay. Even if Henny actually lied and said, no, I did not speak with her, lying doesn't equal criminal offense. It is I don't know if you know this, but lying is actually not illegal. So if she lied about this, it doesn't mean that she should go to jail or whatever. Okay, now in this very entertaining exchange about her flirting with the executive of HYBE, about sleeping with them, thinking that if she has sex with them, they're going to fall for her. This proves that she is willing to use sex to get to the top, but it doesn't prove that she committed something criminal. Sleeping around isn't necessarily criminal. If she sleeps with somebody who's married, that could be criminal, but it has no relation to this case. So, but this one, if the other executive is actually single and she slept with that executive, that's fine. It is not illegal. Now, the other thing I don't like, and I saw this post a lot of people were posting this on X and Facebook and Twitter, is that they're saying that because of this, she gave women in leadership a bad image. And hell to the no. She does not represent women leadership. She does not represent women in general. What she did is all her own doing and has nothing to do with her gender. Just want to put it out there and want to make this clear. In the same breath, if men do something bad, it doesn't have anything to do with their gender. It's just them being stupid. So let's not get the gender discussion into this. Okay. um the thing is that what this whole expose did, is Dispatch being able to play the same game that Mama Roach is playing, public opinion. This is all that it is going to come down to, unless they can actually connect M- Mama Roach with the intention to get investors outside of HYBE during her tenure as a CEO and as a board of director. Uh, the only thing, the closest document, the the document that is closest to a material evidence that Dispatch published is the name of the two directors that the chairman of Davo Link appointed, which are supposedly close associates of Mama Roach. But just because they are close doesn't mean that they were put there because they're going to eventually Mama Roach is going to move to Dabo Link. So that those are the questions that you sent me. Do you have any more questions about this? Um, Mama Roach getting beat at her own game. Mandy March said Mama Roach getting beat at her own game, public opinion. Okay. Oh, we have a lot of people here. Exactly. Let Hype fight on court and let Dispatch the public opinion fight. Yeah. So, if you're going to see a lot of people, if you see some posts on Facebook and on Twitter saying that Dispatch is under the payroll of Hype, do remind them that they're actually the ones who started this mess with Sugar, which we all absolutely despise and hate. So, no, Dispatch, for better or for worse, is just doing their thing. And sometimes they get it right, 90% of the time they get it wrong. So, not, we sometimes they're just doing their own thing. And they're brutal in that they don't really care what's happening. They don't really care who gets hit, for as long as they get to do what they what they want to do. Will Question from Lara: Will short pants be sued by breach of contract if HYBE if they insist on what they want? If they start doing things that is in violation of their contract, for example, um, actually going actually going on national TV and saying those things, the things that they said, uh, that's actually breach. That is a foundation for breach, but it's not yet a done deal, right? Meaning it's not that strong of a breach, because they complained and they badmouthed a lot of people, including Bang Shiuk. But and that could be considered breach, but it is not a very, very strong piece of evidence. One strong piece of evidence that is undeniably a breach is if they start accepting checks and job, and they directly get paid and they don't get paid through HYBE or ADOR. That is breach, because in their contract, all their jobs have to go through HYBE or ADOR. So they cannot transact with anybody directly. If they do that, that is breach. If, for example, and I think uh, And I think there is going, I don't think there is any stupid company, especially if it's an international company, that will do business with them directly. I don't think anybody is that stupid to do that, because Hybe and Adore. I've said this in the live stream. Hybe and Adore is they're probably going to welcome that, so that they can make an example out of that company. If somebody tries to actually do business with them directly, they're going to drag that company to court, and most likely the court of South Korea will favor Hybe. Um, so they want that to happen so that they can make an example of that company. But honestly, I do not think anybody is that stupid. um Another breach would be if they start releasing music not under Hybe or Adore, because their IP is under Hybe or Adore.